Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7x7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. And thank you especially to the patrons who help make this possible for you every single day with their support at patreon.com/SW7x7. Now, right at the top, I just want to say again, I am not going to be doing any Acolyte spoiling whatsoever. We're not going to talk about what happens in the first 2 episodes of The Acolyte until June 5th, after the episodes have been out for a day, right? So we're going to keep talking about Tales of the Empire right up through the release day, so that way you have a daily dose of Star Wars joy you can listen to without fear of spoilers. And today we're continuing our conversation about Realization, which is the second of 3 Barriss Offee episodes in Tales of the Empire. This is our deep dive episode, and we're considering the idea of how hard is it really to turn back from the dark path. I mean, we had Yoda very famously telling us in the original trilogy that once you start down the path of the dark side of the Force, that it would forever consume your destiny. It would dominate your destiny. And yet, here is another example with Barriss Offee of somebody who started down the dark path and was able to kind of retreat from it. Was able to go, not so much, right? And not only did she turn away from that dark path, but she re-identified with the Jedi at the end of Realization, telling the Force sister that there would be one more Jedi she would have to contend with that day. And she actually makes for kind of an easy comparison to Anakin Skywalker in the sense that we've seen her do some very dark side Jedi kinds of things. I'm thinking particularly of Force choking, which is usually only associated with the dark side of the Force, but we see Barriss do it. She does it in the Clone Wars in Season 5. We see her do it in that first episode of Tales of the Empire. We also see Anakin do that on a number of occasions, and he actually does it in one of the episodes in Season 2, I think it is, that Barriss appears in, that we were talking about a couple of days ago. He does that with Poggle the Lesser as part of an interrogation technique. And Anakin has really not been great in any sort of interrogation situation. I mean, there was a really big, Force assault on the mind of Cad Bane at some point that he also committed with Mace Windu and Obi-Wan Kenobi, if memory serves. And Anakin and Barriss both came to the idea that the Jedi were actually evil over the course of their time, considering the effects of the Clone Wars. Granted, they were seeing it from 2 different perspectives. Anakin at the highest levels of Jedi power because of his exposure to the Jedi Council, whereas Barriss as a commander in the Clone Wars and in the Jedi/clone army, she was seeing it from that perspective, and certainly Anakin had that perspective to bring into his considerations as well. There were, of course, differences, and primarily around the idea of attachment and of Anakin not wanting Padme to die in childbirth, not wanting to lose her the way that he lost his mother, and the possibility that Palpatine was the only person who could hold the secret of preserving her life. Barriss wasn't coming at it from that kind of perspective at all. And for that matter, it's one thing for Anakin to say that he thought the Jedi were evil, but he didn't necessarily say that they were, part of the dark side of the Force necessarily, whereas Barriss actually thought that the Jedi Order itself was going down the dark path. So even though Barriss did a very, very bad thing, and certainly there's really no justification for what she did, the idea that maybe she didn't actually turn to the dark side of the Force as a result of the bombing of the Jedi Temple, I think is probably a reasonable conclusion to arrive at. And then you go from there and think about how the Force sister came and got her out of prison and put her through the Inquisitorius program, her fighting with the Grand Inquisitor and then with that other kid Dante for survival. It doesn't seem like she actually went very far down what Yoda liked to refer to as the dark path at all. And maybe that's why it was easier for her to come back to the light side of the Force. I guess you could also contrast that with Quinlan Vos, who went pretty far down the path of the dark side of the Force in the Dark Disciple novel, which itself was an extension of Clone Wars storytelling, but he was able to be pulled back from that. Although, granted, he was going to have to undergo some rehabilitation, comparatively speaking. So yeah, ultimately, maybe the dark side is not necessarily as powerful as Yoda had always tried to convince us it was, and maybe it is a factor of just how, far down the path you go and whether you're able to pull yourself back and what other support systems you have, that it might be a lot more nuanced than we had been previously given to believe. And that, I think, is the benefit of having this world of storytelling that goes so far beyond the movies and is able to explore all of these other characters and situations. So yeah, very cool to have something like Tales of the Empire to check out. And that is my deep dive episode related to Realization, which is the second of the 3 Barriss Offee episodes in Tales of the Empire. That's going to do it for this episode of the podcast. If you enjoy the show, if you enjoy this daily dose of Star Wars joy, I hope you'll consider helping more people discover this daily dose of Star Wars joy. You can do that with ratings and reviews. If you haven't done that already, you can just tell people you know in person or online. You can tell algorithms by subscribing and liking and following and joining on your app of choice, on leaving comments wherever you are. And you can even help me create and produce this daily dose of Star Wars joy. You can learn more about that at patreon.com/SW7X7. Most of the options there, barely the price of a cup of coffee every month. It's very cool and every little bit helps. And it just remains for me to say thank you so much for joining me for this episode. As always, and may the Force be with you wherever in the world you may be.
7x7 is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox, and is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited, or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.